We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss a Hall of Fame quarterback in Troy Aikman and basically calling out the Cowboys, his former team, during their bye week this week. And it's crazy how everyone always says it now, how the Cowboys, whenever they're just playing, whenever they're mentioned, obviously during the NFL season, they're always a big talking point. But even still, during their bye week, they give you a lot to talk about. If not anybody currently playing for them, it's somebody related to them. And this time it's Troy Aikman, like I said. The Hall of Fame quarterback was not happy with what he's seen so far from the offense, obviously, with the lack of running game and whatnot, and Dak not really playing to the level they showed last year. His fault as well, as much as it is, the offense overall, like we've talked about. But he pointed out the wide receivers as a possible culprit to the passing game struggles, and it was pretty interesting that he pointed out to the wide receivers, but also even more interesting what he had to say about them, because he didn't really hold back too much at all. Because he said, "I think the routes are terrible. I think they run terrible routes, and I've thought that beyond this year. I think CeeDee has got to improve in his route running. As a quarterback, if you're not certain where guys are going to be consistently, it's hard to play the position. That's what I see. I see guys lazy coming off the line of scrimmage. Sometimes they run. Usually if they do, it's because they're anticipating they're getting the football on that play, but if they're not, they don't." And apart from that, apart from just calling out directly guys like CeeDee and just the entire wide receiver group, he also said that he was looking at the 49ers receivers, the Ravens receivers, and like the Packers as some of the examples that they show full effort even when they're not getting the ball, and he compared it to the Cowboys and stuff like that, and calling them lazy and things like that as well, coming off of the line of scrimmage. And I mean, to be fair to the Cowboys, that hasn't been my overall takeaway from watching the Cowboys. Do they look lazy coming off the line of scrimmage? I think you really have to be looking for that to have that be a diagnosis of some sorts, but I haven't really paid too much attention to that so far. The reactions on the sidelines with CeeDee and Dak, and CeeDee getting pretty upset by it. Those sort of things, if you want to talk about, maybe not giving as much effort or just pouting and crying about something, that's been more evident to me. Calling them lazy and saying their route running is terrible, I haven't paid too much attention to that, but apparently that's what Troy Aikman has noticed so far. And with the Cowboys, it's one thing to be outmanned, not have the right personnel in this year, and we've talked about that ad nauseum, really. The fact that they haven't added anyone, they lost a lot of starters, they haven't added anybody prolific enough to really help them improve from what they had last year, and they took too long to re-sign, Dak Prescott, especially CeeDee Lamb. That's something else that Troy Aikman mentioned on the show that he was on as well. But all of that it's not fine, but compared to not giving effort, that's the last thing you want to hear, is that someone, especially someone so revered by Cowboys and, the legacy of the Cowboys like Troy Aikman, calling the players lazy and not showing effort in these moments. And it has looked bad for Troy and for the Cowboys receivers to not play well. It's definitely looked bad, but it's something else when someone questions your effort level, right? Especially after 7 weeks. We still got a long way to go. So if you're questioning the effort now, what's it going to look like in about 3 or 4 weeks when they go through a gauntlet of teams that I don't really favor them in any matchup? So what's that going to look like? If it's so bad right now, we might not even recognize this Cowboys team in like 4 weeks when whatever the record is. So I thought that was pretty surprising, especially because he included CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee Lamb is the only guy that really scares you on that offense. But even still, the connection with Dak hasn't really been there. The fact that they are so one-dimensional, everybody focuses on CeeDee Lamb, so it's no secret why maybe this is the only thing I'll say to justify kind of the Cowboys and their receivers. When you know that whatever you're doing isn't working, and when you're losing, you're getting beat up like that, it is hard to show maximum, like pep in your step, go out there energized, like clapping it up, thinking that you're gonna mount a comeback after you've gotten beat up so many times already. It kind of it hurts your morale, and that's the only thing I'll say to kind of justify them. But still, it is something pretty bold to say, I would say, to just say that out and publicly about the Cowboys so far. And usually, when you're talking about effort and things like that, I think it's natural to go and think about why that is and the culture and things like that, and why your efforts are being questioned, right? That should be one of the things that should never be questioned. I would think out of a team like the Cowboys that wants to be in the position where the Lions are and the 49ers are and things like that. But nobody would ever in their right mind question the effort of a Dan Campbell team, of a Shanahan team, of a Matt LaFleur team with the Packers and whatnot like that. So, what could be leading to this, right? And I think it usually reflects on a lot of the times the leadership and the guys that establish a culture and trying to keep the morale up. They're only, I want to say, 3-3 right now, and it feels like it's very down. It feels like it's already like they're already giving in to hearing everybody talk about them, how their season's done. There's no hope for them. It's gonna end the same way as it did last year, or if not even worse. It feels like they're buying into that now, and usually you have strong enough leaders in that locker room to kind of combat that, but it really hasn't been like that with their head coach Mike McCarthy, their quarterback Dak Prescott, and even their best player CeeDee Lamb. What it tells me really is that the culture is pretty fragile, and they're unable to respond well enough to adversity. Right? They're just buying in to accepting the fact that at least it looks like when you're questioning the effort that that they're done this year. Like they're buying into that already, and it kind of relates back to if you want to talk about really establishing the culture to this team. Of course, it starts from the top with Jerry Jones and the fact that we kind of saw how he handled some adversity, right? When someone came at him and criticized them, fairly so, mind you, he became very hostile. So if you got a guy like Jerry not reacting too well to it and sharing those comments publicly to the radio host and being pretty upset by it, it trickles down, right? It reflects. I'm sure all the players heard it. I'm sure they didn't feel great about it. And now with their owner kind of, panicking, being shaken up by the fact that his team's getting criticized by this, and he almost not really having an answer to why they're so bad other than blaming himself, right? Like most people would say, it trickles down, and then once all the players hear it, it's hard to really be motivated going forward. And when you're talking about someone trying to step up, you don't really see anybody doing that. And what's even worse is that you have these comments by Troy Aikman, but also you had Mike McCarthy saying something like the practice hasn't been good enough, and Dak Prescott echoed the same thing, like players aren't just practicing well enough as well. So you have the effort, and then somehow to make it worse, the two leaders of your team, basically on the player standpoint, are saying that the practices now aren't good enough. So what are we doing then? If the practices aren't good enough, then obviously the games are going to look exactly the same, and that's a problem. Then you're really almost doubling down on the fact that this team is already giving up on itself, and looking at the leaders and someone to kind of snap out of it, they're not doing it. And it's not really a surprise to me either, because the head coach isn't really able to steer the ship when he knows this is probably going to be the last year. They haven't resigned him. And coming off of the loss that they had last year in the playoffs and the fact that it's not going any better, I'm not surprised that Mike McCarthy isn't able to break through to these players and get them motivated. Also, the quarterback, Dak, I don't know. I mean, he's not playing great, and I feel like with players, you can only hear so much like rah-rah, trying to hear motivational things from a quarterback where he's the highest paid guy. And then, it kind of gets into a weird spot where that guy's making a lot of money, and he's pretty much locked in. He's got his future locked in. So depending on how the Cowboys play this year, honestly, it doesn't really affect Dak too much. So you can only hear that guy try and motivate you so much that it gets to a point where you're like, all right, like you just start to tune him out because it doesn't really break through enough. You guys are still getting your butts kicked, so you don't really want to hear Dak talk or trying to be motivated or something like that. And CeeDee, he's one of the guys that's being questioned for his effort in route running. So none of these guys are able to step into a leadership position and really think that, or try and steer the ship and try to get everybody refocused. And I think I used this analogy a while ago when we talked about the Cowboys, that they just look like a ship that's kind of just coasting and treading water out at sea, and they have no idea, no way to maneuver or guide themselves, anywhere. They're just kind of floating by, and whatever happens, happens. If a big wave comes and just smacks the heck out of them like the Lions did, no, they can't do anything about it. They're just drifting out at sea, and it's a weird spot to be in also because, again, going back to Jerry Jones, and it's not really about him based on what Troy was saying, but you can't help but connect it back to him because I feel like he overestimated the kind of players and the kind of people, leaders, I guess, that he had in his locker room, because of the fact that he really believed that running it back a whole nother year with the same group of guys was going to produce different results this time. But really what we've seen so far, and what everybody pretty much predicted, was the fact that this Cowboys team are running it back, running the exact same thing back and expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. But not only that, they lost a bunch of players. So the fact that he felt so confident in these guys, it's kind of backfiring on him, right? That's why he's receiving the criticism. That's why some of his most important players are being questioned as leaders and really establishing the culture at this point in time. So it's not surprising that someone like Troy Aikman is saying these comments. And, it feels like this Cowboys team really lacks any sort of substance and really any true character, I guess you could say, as the last statement here. Because this year was a chance to kind of prove everybody wrong, right? Everyone was calling you insane for running it back, and Jerry Jones took a big risk in running it back, like I said. And of course now it's not paying out to kind of benefit him, but it was still an opportunity for guys to step up and prove everybody wrong, but they've just fallen on their face pretty much the entire year, and they just haven't shown up and stepped up to these challenges that they face. They just keep getting beat up at home. It's crazy to how just easily teams just run all over them, and to question their character and stuff like that. You would never question a Mike Tomlin led team, a team with, what you're going to get out of them, establish that culture yet again, right, with the Steelers. Just looking at it last year, their quarterback situation, their offense was awful, and still they made the playoffs. That's a team, that's when, you lose a bunch of guys, your team's not one of the touted favorites, but you still are decent enough and are sure enough in yourself to go out and make the playoffs. No one questions what Dan Campbell's doing in Detroit, right? They've established a culture. You know what you're going to get out of the Lions, and that's the last thing anyone would say about a Dan Campbell-led team. Same thing goes for the Chiefs. You know what you're going to get out of them, the dynasty, the mystique that they've built up, and you can say the same thing about a bunch of teams, right? The really good ones. So it says a lot that the Troy Aikman brought this up. Pretty bold claims in a week where the Cowboys aren't even playing, but when someone says something like this about you, it really hits hard, I think, for Cowboys to kind of come to this realization, I guess. And the next couple of weeks are going to be interesting, right? The bye week is coming at a good time where they can kind of regroup. Comments like this don't really help, but if you want to get motivated, it could serve as that sort of tool for you if they wanted it to be. But yeah, like the next couple weeks are certainly going to be interesting for this team if they're able to kind of pick themselves up and respond, or are we going to see more of the same? I'll be interested to watch that come next week. But for right now, talking about teams in the Cowboys that aren't playing, we're going to get to the teams that are playing this week and finish up the game weeks that we didn't finish last episode yesterday. So after this break, we're going to come back, talk about the remaining 6 matchups that we have on Sunday, and break them down and pick a winner for those 6 games. Don't go anywhere. We got a lot more coming up after this.